As companies work to reopen their offices after the COVID-19 pandemic, they face several issues, such as what types of tools and technology do they need to have in place to reopen safely and effectively? And what do their employees expect to see when they come back to the office? Will they return? To help us answer these questions, I'm joined by Carl Oliveri, CRO at Robin. They have a new product coming out to help offices reopen and some new research about employee reactions to coming back into the office. Carl, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So, before we get to some of this new data that Robin's collected around reopening, for those who aren't familiar with Robin, give me a little bit of a rundown on the company and some of the products that you offer.
Sure. So Robin's the first workplace platform that puts people before places. Our platform really empowers employees to choose how and where they work within the office. They use our mobile app in our interactive map to book things like their desks for the day or a conference room for certain meetings, check into those desks, complete health checkpoints. They use the map for wayfinding or people finding within the office, finding coworkers. And while employees are using the application and booking desks and conference rooms, our analytics are providing IT and facilities and HR leaders the tools and insights that they need to make sure that their hybrid workplace is being successful.
And what are some of the? I know you have some new offerings that are coming up to help companies as they reopen their offices as we move past, or at least past the major outbreaks of the COVID pandemic. Tell me about some of those.
Sure. So, yeah, a major part of the platform, we're really excited to be launching Office Pass as part of our platform this week, as a matter of fact. So, if you think about what companies are dealing with right now, every company is basically bucketing their employees and taking stock of how their employees want to work. And it's a bell curve. On one extreme, you have employees that want to work remote full time. On the other extreme, you have employees who want to work in the office full time. But the lion's share of employees have really said that they want to work in some sort of hybrid situation, work in the office a couple days a week or 3 times a week, and then home 2 days a week. And they're really hungry for choices. What Office Pass does is it eliminates a lot of that friction in the office experience by making it really easy to align their schedules with colleagues and leverage all the company assets to the fullest extent. Admins can use the new pass management to set up scheduled access to the office for certain groups of employees or departments, and really control what that flow looks like.
So how is this different, and from your perspective, maybe better than, say, a traditional scheduling apps that everyone's probably familiar with in their productivity suite, right? So, beyond just scheduling conference rooms or maybe working hours or, scheduling meetings, how does Office Pass go to the next step?
Yeah, it's a great question, Bill. So if you think about workplace leaders and their primary challenge, it's right now it's creating an employee experience that instills confidence in employees and really earns them back to the office and helps them perform their best. We when you think about productivity, pre-pandemic, the country was when you think about just the US, the country was at over full employment. We are quickly going to get back there, and allowing employees to have a seamless experience with the office and focusing on the employee is where we separate ourselves, quite frankly. Customers, we really work with forward-looking companies like Twitter, HubSpot, Toyota, Peloton, and we're helping them transition from that old way of working where you've scheduled everybody into the office, they have assigned desks. We really help them transition to this new hybrid model and reshape the workplace based on what employees actually need and want.
So this is really useful for companies that have embraced maybe hotel desks, flexible workspaces, right? As opposed to, as you were just talking to, traditional, you have an assigned cube, you have an assigned desk or an assigned office that you're in and no one else is.
That's correct. That is where it is really useful. We also have functionality for assigned desks. There are plenty of companies out there that are still going to have assigned desks for a certain subset of their employee population. And the difference is we will communicate to the employee and allow them to interact. If you have an assigned desk, there's no functionality that actually tells you whether or not you showed up to the office. And administrators want to know that. They want to know who's in the office and when. We also will help with our map technology, just help show employees who's sitting around them, where certain departments are. And it's really just bringing that user experience and employee facing part of the traditional scheduling and assignment.
So I know this is a question you probably get all the time, and you know, in the wake of COVID, it's even more important. How do you manage privacy and security when it comes to this type of information? Because I know that, you know, when we're talking about health information, it's something that companies are grappling with in terms of, you know, can they require employees to be vaccinated? There are local laws and jurisdictional rules that companies have to follow. But beside that, companies themselves are just concerned about, hey, can I require people to be vaccinated? How do I track that? You know, maybe we're just doing temperature checks. How can I track those kinds of things? And all that's really, you know, sensitive information for both companies and for the individual, the employee. How do you manage that kind of the privacy and security and maybe alleviate some of the fears that employees have if their employer is rolling out this technology to say, well, I don't necessarily know that I want my employer monitoring when I come in, and I don't mean or where I'm moving throughout the office beyond just saying, you know, our standard working hours are between this, and this is what I have on the schedule. Can you speak to that just a little bit?
Sure. So we're not really storing information. So when I talked about the health checkpoint, really that's a questionnaire that the employee answers, and it's to make sure it's a standard questionnaire that a company can come up with to make sure that they aren't showing signs of COVID. We're not storing that information, right? That's simply a questionnaire that companies are requesting, and then they will make a determination whether or not that employee has access to the office. So that piece of it, from a HIPAA compliance standpoint, we're not holding on to any of that information. We're simply communicating it back and forth between the administrators and the employees. Um, we are not tracking movements within the office. It is really about what is being used in the office and to what extent. And it's not subject to any specific individuals. We want to know that, you know, the administrators on the back end will work with their employee base and keep that type of information in their HRIS system. We just want to help facilitate the communication with the employee and show them, like, remove the friction from that part of the day.
And I think that goes a long way to helping people say, you know, understand the technology, say, look, it's on your phone. It allows you to schedule this desk. It allows you to schedule a conference room. It allows administrators to know, well, how often is this conference room or this resource used? But on the individual level, I'm not being geo-tracked around the office on my, you know, just because I have the app on my phone. So I think if I'm hearing you correct, that's what you're doing.
That is exactly right. Very well said. That's exactly right.
Okay, great. Well, let's jump right into some of the new research and data that you've collected about returning to work. Tell me about that.
Sure. So, you know, we've been collecting data in our customer base since we were founded in 2014, and we have millions and millions of data points that tell us how offices are being used, how they were being used, and how they are being used. So our research team, after analyzing those millions of data points we took a finite period. So we started in October of 20 for this first subset of the return to office tracker that we are launching. And we're going to report on October 2020 to March 2021, just what we're seeing around the world in terms of employees going back to the office, how often they're going back to the office, what their scheduled return looks like.
I know I was going to say, and what are some of the findings? I'm really, it's great data because it sounds like a really interesting data set because this is actually not necessarily survey data. It's not asking people, hey, what do you think you're going to do? This is really like what people are kind of have done or are doing, which is really, good data to have. So what are some of the insights that you've gleaned from that information?
Yeah, there have been some interesting ones. So our data team found that areas with lower COVID infection rates are obviously coming back to the office quicker than let's say the US, for example. Australia and New Zealand give us a little bit of a preview of what the US will look like in 3 months' time. We believe after looking at the data that they are about 3 months ahead of the US in starting to head back. We're already seeing, as we look across the world, we're already seeing a vast majority of employees that want to go into the office. They're coming back at a rate of about twice a week in the office and 3 days from home or other locations. And we're seeing a strong trend towards the beginning part of the week. This was a little surprising for me, actually. So far, Tuesday is shaping up to be one of the busiest days, or the days that most people are headed back to the office, followed by Monday. And Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are a lot more frequent in bookings than Thursday, Friday. One of the really interesting things, and I think one of the things that we need to watch and going forward, is something we're calling the employee bounce rate. 15% of global employees have returned to the office once and then haven't returned again in those 6 months. And although the data doesn't tell us why that is, you can infer that employees just, when they went back, were not comfortable with what they were getting out of the office. And and it's something that I think workplace leaders have to watch and be conscious of.
And I know you shared some of the data with me prior to our call, and that was the thing that stuck out to me was that, the why. Really trying to understand what is it about the office environment that folks didn't find comfortable. Was it related to COVID and some of the safety measures or the lack of the safety measures the employers were taking? Was it just a sense that they're not getting as much benefit from being in the office as they thought they might? They decided, my productivity has gone up. Is it just that they didn't realize how much of a burden or how much they disliked some of the things like the commute, or they overestimated the benefits they thought they would get. So I think that's, if there's a plan to sort of, it's a little bit outside the purview of the what your technology would allow you to collect. But that is, I think, the next step that I think companies really have to ask themselves is, what is causing this bounce rate if they have that?
Yeah, that's 100% correct. I think there are so many different factors figuring into that. And the closer we get to, vaccination and everybody starting to, let's call it the post-pandemic world, the office, in our opinion, has forever changed. Pre-pandemic, the US was still lagging places like EMEA and APAC when it came to flexible work and allowing employees choices. The US is quickly has to catch up, and a lot of the factors that are, when employees go back and they go back once, it could be so many different things. It could be that they got to the office and there were only 2 or 3 people in the office. So the thought of collaboration, the thought of being productive when you get back to the office wasn't there because there just weren't that many people in the office. And I think that's where Office Pass starts to become really useful and why we're so excited about it. Because as you start to control the flow, you can really start to engineer things in a way where your employees are getting the most benefit out of not just the workplace from a physical standpoint, but also collaboration with other teams and depending on what meetings or work has to be done. So yeah, so you were exactly right.
And I'd love to sort of, as we kind of wrap up our conversation, I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on that those permanent changes that we're going to see in the post-pandemic world, and especially because I think this data was predominantly was collected outside the United States. How you think the how you think the United States needs to change its culture, its office culture, its culture of kind of work, to maybe and I think a lot of executives would originally think it's, it seems counterintuitive to actually increase productivity, because by providing a better experience, not just in terms of, hey, you've got really cool games in the office, or you've got a really great buffet, or you've got these wonderful physical amenities, but the personal connections and the collaboration just maybe isn't there. I'd love to just hear your general thoughts on where you think the North American, that U.S. office is going. Are we going to catch up to APAC and EMEA in terms of the thinking around flexibility and around how that affects and can improve productivity?
So we do collect data within the US, and it's just not as much post-pandemic, let's call it. We are seeing certain states, Florida, Virginia, North Carolina, those three states, I think, are leading the pack in terms of having employees back to the office. Um, that said, the US absolutely will catch up when it comes to hybrid or flexible work. And quite frankly, we have to. My personal opinion is that it is all about employee productivity and giving employees choices about where they can be the most productive. Um, Going back to the pre-pandemic situation where we were at full employment, employees have choices now. And if 87% of employees want some sort of hybrid or flexible work scenario, it is really important that leaders recognize that. And if you're not going to give employees choices, you're going to run into issues with retention. You're going to run into issues with, as we said, productivity. It's something that I think the U.S. the COVID situation has really accelerated the understanding of what it means to offer employees choices and how that can show up in employee retention and buy-in and helping just make them more productive.
Do you think that is something that was a hard lesson to learn? Do you think that U.S. executives were already going that way? Because, there's always a little bit of a generational lag. People who are in leadership positions tended to maybe come up through decades past, where just culturally employee expectations were different, technology was different, and so there always does seem to be a little bit of a lag. But do you think that it's the pandemic, as you said, was an inflection point, and so people have, you're starting to see leaders actually decide, what, we do need to keep our employees happy and productive, and that's good for the team, it's good for the company as a whole, because what is providing the what's making employees happy and feel fulfilled and being able to be productive in their work, that has changed. So like you said, it's now choice, whereas in the past it might not have been, I don't need all this flexibility, I just want X, I want stability or something different. Not to say that people don't want stability now, but maybe, that's part of that learning curve is it really is about choice. I want flexibility. I want choice. And if you trust me enough as an employer to give me the tools to make those choices, make them smart, to do my job, then I'm going to be more fulfilled. I'm going to stay around longer. I'm going to work harder. And I'm going to be more creative. Is that what or at least, it sounds like that's the place we all want to get to. But is that what you're seeing in your conversations? You talk to a lot of companies, and we've seen news recently from Microsoft and Salesforce and others about what they're doing, and some of them are doing things very differently. But is that what you're hearing? What are you hearing from your executives?
Without a doubt, that is exactly what we're hearing. And the U.S. was making strides. We a lot of our client base is in the U.S. and pre-pandemic that was the case as well. So a lot of companies and executives were thinking, but it was taking slow steps forward towards more of that environment. Of course, the pandemic being the inflection point and now managing the return, that part of it will continue to accelerate, and quite frankly, has to, for all the reasons that you just outlined.
Well, Carl, I think that's a great place to end it. I certainly hope it. I hope that the positive changes that everybody has make and is or has made and is going to be making stick around. And I appreciate again you taking the time to talk with us.
Sure, I really appreciate the time and enjoyed our time together. So thank you.